Hi, everyone. I am Sabrina Wood, otherwise known as the Cinnamon Cinephile, and welcome to another episode of CinneCine Goes SyFy. And this week, I have a super film, one of my all-time favorites from my childhood. It is Godzilla, King of the Monsters. And I know there are 36 different Godzilla films, and I'm sure you've seen some of something. But if you haven't seen the one we're going to talk about tonight, here's a little taste.
Godzilla, King of the Monsters, whose death ray blasts the city from the face of the earth before your very eyes. Godzilla alive! Stalking across the world, crushing all before it. Is Godzilla fantasy or a prophecy of doom? For the answer, see Godzilla, King of the Monsters. A tale of horror more fantastic than any ever written by Jules Verne. More terrifying than any ever shown on the screen. Godzilla, King of the Monsters. Incredible titan of terror. A story to stun the mind as a gargantuan creature of the sea surges up on a tidal wave of destruction to wreak vengeance on the earth. Godzilla, King of the Monsters. Fantastic beyond comprehension. Tripping beyond compare. Astounding beyond belief. The mightiest monster of them all. Godzilla, King of the Monsters.
Oh my God. What did I tell you? Is that the most incredible thing ever? I have to tell you, I am in love with 50s trailers because they are so over the top and extras. I mean, the man was just screaming about Godzilla. I love it. So this is a huge movie and a huge franchise, and I cannot, as usual, do this alone. So joining me tonight is my buddy, Kayleigha Zawacki. Hey, Kayleigha, thanks for joining me.
Thank you so much for having me. I am so excited for this discussion.
You think? She's, she is turned out. I love it. I love it. So Kayleigha and I go back a few years now. She is one of the very first people that the SyFy Sisters met. I mean, like week one, we were doing a con, an online con with you, and that's how we met. And we've known each other for a while now. You know, we've been at conventions and all kinds of things. You've been on our podcast. And I never knew that you loved Godzilla as much as I do.
So much love for Godzilla.
So, okay, I want to tell everybody about you because you're wonderful. And I have, as usual, my little card because there's so much stuff about you that I didn't even know all this stuff, girl. I was like, really? Okay. So Kayleigha is a multimedia artist and designer with both an MFA and a BFA from Boston University in lighting design and theater design. She specializes in theater design, storytelling, world building, content creation, mixed media installation, and business management. She designs, sculpts, welds, photographs, and with her husband, Jay, she created Science Division, which created and gave the world the first interactive tribbles. So there's nobody better to talk about this film than this incredibly talented woman. Hey, Leah, girl, how did you, I mean, how you do all that?
You're being overly kind. You really are.
Oh, I remember when you were going for the MFA.
Yeah.
I remember because we were, you were like really working that and the thesis and everything. I do remember all of that. So tell us a little bit about how you got into Godzilla and what was your entry movie?
So this is hard. I cannot tell you for sure what the entry movie was. All I can tell you is the same thing I can tell you about Star Trek, which is it's my dad's fault.
Oh, okay. Okay.
Yeah.
Blame
So
him.
my sister and I grew up watching Godzilla with my dad the same way we were watching Star Trek with him. I suspect I saw probably the American version of Godzilla first, because I don't remember watching anything that wasn't dubbed over. We weren't watching the ones that had subtitles. I think it was a lot harder to get at the time, subtitles with the original content. But I know that the first one we saw, Godzilla died, and I was completely bereft for Godzilla. And so that's why I think, right. And my dad was like, it's cool. He might come back. And then we watched all of the others. I can say
there's so many of them.
So many. And one of my favorites though is Godzilla versus Mothra. That's the one that because Jay and I actually, before you asked me to come on this podcast, which is so funny, we had already decided we were gonna start from the beginning and watch them all. So I had already gotten my dad had the Criterion Collection on DVD,
Yes.
but he had it at his house, so we couldn't get that, and at the time it was sold out. I think we weren't able to buy it.
Right.
So Jay had found somebody gave him a set of DVDs that they had that has all the way up to, I think, 2019, all of the
Hmm.
movies all the way up
Yeah.
to then. So we were gonna start from that, and then we went to visit my dad over the summer, and he gave me the Criterion Collection to borrow. So we've actually been watching kind of multiple versions of all of the movies to compare them with each other. But
Mm.
we were already in that process when you asked me to do this, and I was just like, the timing is perfect. But,
Because this is the 70th anniversary of Godzilla. This
right.
franchise is the longest running movie franchise in the world. Okay, so this is not just a creature feature. This is history.
Right, right, right. So I think now we're up to Ebera, Horror of the Deep is the last one that we just watched. And Jay is loving they're not in Ebera, but the one before, Jay is loving the aliens that, come
Yeah, when
down
the
and interfere.
yeah,
Godzilla gets taken into space,
it's
all
a whole
kinds of
nother
crazy,
thing.
crazy things happen. But I have always loved Godzilla versus Mothra because we got this female monster who comes in and kinda gets the guys in order, right? Because Godzilla and Rodan are just, like, fighting each other. They're basically just frat boy wrestling, and Mothra shows up and is like, "Guys, we got work to do." And
To
she
save
just,
the
like,
world.
gets them in order. Yeah, yeah, yeah. So Mothra has always been one of my favorite kaiju.
Right, and Mothra is in this latest one, Godzilla versus Kong. Mothra comes in again in 2024. Mothra is back 'cause she's
Right.
that
She's
bad. She is
always,
that bad.
always the savior. Yes, she shows
Yes,
up. She's the one that people can, the islanders have bothered to communicate with. And she's like, don't worry, I'll fix this. I'll
and
get
she's
the guys in
beautiful.
order. Yeah, I love Mothra.
Yes, yes. Well, the movie that we're talking about tonight is the one that started it all, and it's the one from 1954, Japan, from Toho Studios, Godzilla. And originally it was called Gajira, Gajira, which is a combination of two words, one that means gorilla and one that means whale. But then it kind of morphed into Godzilla, I guess, when it
Mhm.
came over to the United States, and the whole rest of the world was calling it Godzilla. The Japanese changed the title and made it Godzilla for them too. So I wanted to talk about this movie because I know a lot of people think that the entire franchise is just a creature feature. It's just
Mhm.
a monster movie. And what is it that made this franchise last so long and go so deep? And a lot of it has to do with the DNA that was created in this first film. And like I said, it's from 1954, made in Japan. And I'm going to give you a little background into what was going on in Japan when this movie was made and why it struck the Japanese people so hard that it made it one of it was like the most the biggest selling ticket film in history when it came out. So you have to remember this is 9 years after World War II. And World War II, we had the horrific Hiroshima and Nagasaki bomb drops in Japan. So the Americans wiped out these two cities with an A bomb. So the Japanese were already having this fear of atomic weapons. And then what happens in after that is the Americans come in, help them build Japan back. I mean, we had destroyed 90% of all the Japanese cities. We had destroyed 60% of Tokyo, and it was just a mess. Nagasaki and Hiroshima were completely devastated, destroyed. So they build up again, and when the Americans finally leave 7 years after the war, Japanese filmmaking starts to come back. They had been censored all this time, and even before the war, they had undergone like a terrific setback when they had a huge earthquake that just decimated most of the studios in Tokyo. So here we go with Godzilla, and the producer of this film is a gentleman named Tanaka, and I'm not even going to try to get all the first names, but just know Tanaka. He is the producer. This guy in 1954 has got to come up with another movie. He's already got one movie in the can, but he needs two for the year. He's in Jakarta making the second movie gonna happen, and everything falls apart. Ugh. He's on a plane coming back to Tokyo. He's like, "What am I gonna make?" And he's reading a magazine on the plane, and it's an article about the beast from 2000 fathoms. All right, Kayleigha, have you seen that film?
I have seen bits and pieces from it, so it's added to our Godzilla watch
Yeah,
list, just so I go back and add that to our monster movie watch.
have to add it, have to add it, because
Yeah,
this is the information that the producer
right.
Tanaka is reading this article about how the Americans make this film with stop motion. It's a prehistoric beast comes in and takes out New York. I'm like, okay, let's watch this. And he sees how much money this movie made. It was a $200,000 movie that came back with 5 million. He's like, okay. Now, the other thing that got him was King Kong had just been re-released. And that movie was taking America by storm. So he's like, all right, we got to do a monster movie because this stuff is going to make a whole lot of money. He reads this. He's like, we're going to do it. He writes an outline on the plane, gets back to Tokyo, finds his script writer to make it a little bit better. But what happens in the meanwhile is the explosion of the H bomb on the Bikini Atoll. The Americans are testing, and the Castle Bravo bomb goes off. It is 1,000 times stronger than the bomb that leveled Hiroshima. 1,000 times stronger. Now, whether the Americans didn't take into effect the wind report for that day, and I think they were also surprised at how strong the bomb was, but the atomic fallout spread far wider than anyone ever anticipated. And so a Japanese fishing boat named the Lucky Dragon 5, Lucky Dragon 5 gets dusted. These guys all get exposed to the radiation. Now, they tried to play it off. The Americans tried to play it off, acting like this didn't happen, but it wasn't just the Lucky Dragon 5. It was 898 fishing boats that got exposed. It was over 20,000 fishermen, and they took out the fish catch for weeks. So the Japanese were devastated. The economic blow was amazing. Tanaka writes this into Godzilla. So now, why this is not a creature feature? 3 reasons. We've got this whole idea of anti-nuclear proliferation. They're going to put this in the story, and Godzilla is now a metaphor of this thing. They create this monster who has been enlarged because of the radiation. He's got atomic breath coming out of him. He lights up, his spikes light up, and he also has the skin that looks like it has been irradiated. There was a name for people who actually had survived the radiation blast, and they were called, I'm going to my cards, they were called the Hibakushas. And Godzilla is actually a Hibakusha. He is a victim of atomic blast. So that is in this film. So, okay, here's the first level why this is not a creature feature. Now, you saw this, and you're a theater person, and you saw this design of this monster. So I see that you have your friends there with you. So what did you think of the designer when you saw, this incredible piece of, man in a suit? We're going to do man in a suit.
Yeah, it's funny. I love Man in a Suit Godzilla more than I will ever love CGI Godzilla.
That's why
And
you're my friend.
part of the reason is when you put a person in a suit, they're still going to move to a certain extent like a person, right? This creature is a character because we see humanity in the creature inherently, in the fact that this is a person in the suit. Even if you're watching it in this beautiful kind of film noir, really dark, well edited sort of format, there's still something that inherently as a person, that there's a person that's present in Godzilla. The newest movie that actually won the where Godzilla finally won an Oscar, right? Amazing. The CGI, that Godzilla is so cool, but
Oh my
he is
God.
not a character. He's a plot device, right? You
Okay.
don't have that same attachment to that really, really cool computer Godzilla.
Yeah.
And so I will never love a movie that has a CGI Godzilla as much as I'm going to love the man in a suit Godzilla.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. And I know that people kind of say, oh, these old movies, it's just a man in a suit. It's kind of like what people say when they watch, The Devil in the Dark and the Hoarder, like, it's just a guy.
Love the Horda.
We love the Hoarder. And we love Godzilla. Come on. So
I
the
used to
men,
dress up as the Horda. I would put a
oh,
beanbag over my head as a kid, and I'd like crawl around the floor and leave a piece of paper around that said "No kill I."
you was you were too much. You were too much. So
We were weird kids. My
you
sister and I were weird kids.
definition of a nerd. Definition of a nerd. So you know what? I don't even want to tell you the kind of things that I pretended to be when I was a kid. So yeah, I did a few things like that too. Wasn't particularly the hoarder. I was grown when the hoarder came out. But the men in the suit thing happened because there were these constraints on Godzilla on the production of it. So they brought in Tanaka brings in his boy Ashiro Honda. Ashiro Honda has been associated with the Godzilla movies from 1954 right up until 1975, and he is an incredible director. And he is part of the Toho Studios. And Toho Studios in Japan is renowned for various movies. The other movie this studio puts out this same year is The Seven Samurai by Akira Kurosawa. So this is the kind of studio we have here. Honda is that level of director. In fact, he is a good friend of Akira Kurosawa, who many believe is one of the greatest directors in Japanese cinema and possibly one of the greatest director of the world cinema. Everybody will say that Kurosawa is one of the greatest directors. Scorsese has said it, John Carpenter has said it, Tim Burton, all of them have been influenced by Akira Kurosawa. So Ashiro Honda, who directs Godzilla, is one of his friends. People are telling Honda, don't make a monster movie. You're going to ruin your career making a monster movie. You're like up here with Kurosawa. What is wrong with you? Kurosawa saying, this guy is on the same level as me. To the point that when Kurosawa got older and was more physically infirm, Honda came in as an assistant director and finished his films. So if you love the film Ran, if anybody here is a Japanese movie fan and you know what movie I'm talking about, Ran is the film. Honda is the assistant director on that film and finished it for Kurosawa. Kurosawa actually gave the eulogy for Honda at his funeral, and Honda actually gave the congratulations from Toho Studios to Kurosawa when he won his Oscar. So these guys were like this. And so here he is now saying, I'm going to make this monster movie. And he's going to make it because he reads the script and the script just hits him. It's got all of this stuff about the anti-nuclear stuff. It's got the other thing in it that a lot of the newer films don't have, and it's this incredible story, the story that the humans go through. Now, I just saw Godzilla versus Kong, and I got, it kind of lost me when I saw Godzilla sleeping in the Coliseum. I was taken out a little bit. I was like, are we really doing this? Okay. I know a lot of people love this one. But even though that Godzilla rampaged through Europe, you never got a sense of what the destruction did to the people in Italy or Spain or wherever he just went running through. He just went, that was it. You just saw people running and that was it. But here we have a story of survivors and loss. And we even have a love story. Were you surprised that there was a love story in this one?
Yes, and it's so funny because, I've told you we're watching two different versions, and
Mm-hmm.
depending on, or I guess three, because I watched two different versions with subtitles, and then the American version with Raymond Burr. And the first version with subtitles, it was really difficult for us to tell that that was going on at all.
Mm-hmm.
It wasn't until we watched a different version with subtitles that we picked up on how that was going, because it's so quick, a lot of the stuff.
Yeah,
Yeah,
but it's there. I
it
mean,
is there. Yeah.
okay. Can I? Because me, I'm a rom-com girl. I love a good romance, and I'm telling you, if there's a romance in a Godzilla movie, I'm all over this. Let's just talk a second about Emiko. Emiko is the only like female in this movie, and I love to talk about female in these kind of movies. We talked a little bit about the women in Akira last episode, and so Emiko is fascinating to me. I mean, she looks like, she's going to be that stereotypical Japanese woman in the film, and she's going to be like, and falling down and everything. But she doesn't. If you watch her in this film, she is the epitome of the survivor.
Mm.
She does everything in this. I mean, she starts off as the girlfriend, and I want to just talk a second about that first scene where we see Emiko, and she's in Ogata's apartment.
Yes.
Okay, and he's like drying off like he's coming out of the shower.
Yeah.
And
Yeah, and
I'm
they're about
like,
to go on a
wait,
date. They're headed out the door on a date, and that
but
I
she
think that's
seemed
part of why we missed it in the first translation. We're like, but she's like living with him.
what? I know. I was like, wait, wait, wait. Amiko, what are you doing in his house? Like she was totally unperturbed that this man was coming out of the shower half dressed. And
Yeah.
I went, oh, this did not seem like 1954 Japan to me because Amiko was like, so you ready?
Yeah.
He's I'm like, what is going on? And we notice she's the fiance of somebody else.
Yep.
I'm like, whoa, I said, wait, hold the monster. I want to know what's going on with Amiko. So then we see Amiko later. She goes. All right, here's the plot. You know, the bomb goes off. The monster is irradiated. He comes on land. Devastation on this poor little island, Odo Island. I mean, we have read Star Trek before I even start. I don't even have to do 6 degrees. It's called Odo Island.
Ew.
So Godzilla comes up, causes all kinds of panic, and so now he's already destroyed 3 ships in a row because you don't see Godzilla until like maybe
No.
15 minutes in. First you see the first ship goes down, and that scene where they show the people on the top of the ship, the fishing, the freighter,
Mhm.
and these guys are just having a nice time and they're playing the guitar and everything's cool. They're just smoking, hey. And then all of a sudden you see the flash of light and then the ship goes down. All hands lost. And that was the homage to the Lucky Dragon 5.
Well,
That's
if you
exactly.
notice, the life preserver says number 5 on it. That's behind
Girl!
the sailors. Yeah,
Yes.
and it's so funny because if you listen to the description of essentially what the fishermen saw when the Bikini Atoll bomb went off, it was this essentially flash of light,
Yep.
and then death essentially descended upon them in the form of this powder that made a lot of them really sick and actually killed some of them.
Yes, some of them died.
Right,
Yes.
and when your first experience with Godzilla is akin to the same thing. They see something out in the water, there's this bright flash, you see the bright flash on them, they're
Mm.
blinded by something, and then the ship goes down. And it's this beautiful kind of mirror. It's exactly what they saw on the Lucky Dragon number 5.
I tell you, and when you know that that's what inspired this film, it's that first scene. It's basically the first scene of the film. I mean, he's
Mhm.
coming right out at you like, this is the horror that we experience, and the ship goes down. And then they send another ship out there to see what happens, and that ship goes down. And then they
Mhm.
send another ship to see what happens. The fishing boat goes, and that one goes down. And now we know we have an emergency. We don't know what's going on. There's an emergency, and this is what breaks up the date. So, Amiko was there with Ogata, who is a ship captain, and they're getting ready to go out on a date, but he gets the call saying, you got to come into the office because these ships are going down left and right. So he's got to run. You know, Godzilla breaks up the date, and Godzilla's going to break up their love story like all the way through. Godzilla keeps interrupting these two. So he goes, it's like every time, my boy is about to make a move, there's some Godzilla emergency. He's got to run. I love it.
I
So
think it's also important when we throw out the love triangle thing. I think it's important to mention that the guy she's betrothed to, the
yes.
scientist Sarazawa, they were betrothed from birth. So there was
Yeah.
never a romantic necessarily relationship there, and
No?
he's really involved in his work, which is
Yes.
I think probably what has driven her to
Because
Oga.
he had listen, boyfriend was in the basement a little too long. What was Amiko supposed to do? He's in the basement all the time doing the secret experiment. She's like, for real? So, so
Because so
she
often when you hear love triangle, it's like I love you, but you love her, and it's not like that so much at all. It's I've got this guy, I've been,
I've been engaged to
I'm
since I was
assigned
born.
to him, but I'd rather not.
But he was her father's
Right,
research partner.
right.
So she grew up basically knowing this man. And she said at one point, I love him like a brother.
Hmm.
So she was completely, trying. She loved him. She did, but not like that. But she
Right.
was going to marry him until this guy showed up with his, undershirt and everything dropped, soaking wet. I mean, I was like, "What is going on in this 1954?" So they go to Odo Island now to see what's going on. So it's the father who is the paleontologist, and this one here's another set of constraints that was put upon Honda when he was making this movie. he had a short budget, and one of the things he had to give up was the level of acting skills. So the three that are in this triangles, Siragawa, Miko, and Ogata, are all relatively new actors, and they do their best. But Honda had to give them a lot of hand holding. But the one that stabilizes this movie, and the person that you need to watch in this film, is the gentleman who is playing the father, and he is a huge actor. He is like the Cary Grant. Well, I wouldn't say Cary Grant because he's older in this film. And his name, okay, I'm going through my card to find his name. Shumira is his last name. And he is the man who Honda, Kurosawa, they go to this man. He has made over 200 films by the time he plays the paleontologist here. And he is the stabilizing actor in this for the younger crew. And it is really fun to watch him in his scenes. He just had done the Seven Samurai, and then came over to do Godzilla with his other director here. But he plays the Yul Brynner part in the Japanese or the Denzel Washington part, whichever's Magnificent Seven, you know. But this gentleman that is playing the paleontologist plays the Yul Brynner part in the original Seven Samurai. So watch this performance. He is great. And I take my hat off to the three younger actors. They did their best. But if there's one little detriment to this film, it's their acting skills. But they're cute. I love them. They did their best. Miko is my girl. I love her. She is just so dainty and cute and pretty. I love her. But she's got a backbone of steel. She goes to that island, and now she's her father's assistant. So she knows her way around an archaeological dig.
She is wearing pants.
She's wearing pants. Amiko is cool.
Yep.
And then, later on, you're going to see Amiko. She is in the hospital scene after the radiation. She's there in that horrible scene where they pan over all the wounded and the affected, and the Geiger counter is going, and she's sitting next to the man that's doing the Geiger counter on the little girl, and you can tell she's already blind from the radiation, and he just shakes his head no. And she gets through that. She's in the hospital. She's on the boat. She's everywhere. Even at the end, when they lower the guys into the water to go and kill Godzilla, she's on the hose. Miko's letting out the hose.
Well, she's about to potentially lose two husbands. Yeah. Like they're both going down there.
Both the man she loves and the brother, the one that she loves like a brother, are both going under.
Yeah.
Amiko's like, let me make sure this is working right. But I mean, I want you to watch her through this because I love the character, and I attribute it to Ashiro Honda. Always like to have a strong woman in his film, and this is mostly because of his influence of his wife, Kimi. Kimi Honda is almost the equivalent of Alfred Hitchcock's wife, Alma. She, for Honda, read the scripts, gave her advice, told him what she thought of the film, and I am sure that he made this Emiko character the backbone of this whole Godzilla. I mean, she survives and goes through all of it. She never loses her mind. She never goes crazy. I mean, when she saw him the first time, she did let out a scream, and she did fall once, but Ogata was there to pick her up. He got her up. I was like,
there's a little bit of like 1950s in that moment.
Just a little bit, but it was all right. You know what? If I saw Godzilla's head pop up over the hill, I mean, I don't know about you, but it's one of the funniest but scariest scenes ever. There they are on this island, and they see the big footprints. And I mean, Godzilla is dragging up, 1,000-year-old, million-year-old fish with them. There's like these ancient fish are in the foot. I mean, it was crazy. They're looking for the monster. They see the footprints. He's devastated this whole place. And then in the middle of it, in broad daylight, they're looking out to the sea, and this not even little, this huge Godzilla head pops up, and I screamed.
It's really funny because he like pops up and he's like, I'm here. And then he's just like, he's gone. They're all running up the hill. They all run back down.
Everybody went crazy. The island went crazy. Everybody is running. I was like, get out of it. That's when Amiko goes down. I was like, all right, girlfriend, I will give you that one, because if I saw that head pop up, I would have fell down too. But now I want to go back to Honda in this filming this. There were 3 scenes I want you all to watch when you're watching this movie. And this is the first one on Odo Island. I wanted to go back a little bit about when I said that Japanese filmmaking had taken some serious blows, first with the earthquake losing a lot of equipment in Tokyo, And then the second place, the war happens. So when Honda is making this movie, the other constraint he has is that he's got old equipment from the 30s and he's got nitrate film. So when you mentioned a little while ago, it was dark, it was
Mhm.
a result of this nitrate film that he had to use. That's all they had. And so now he's got this big, bulky old cameras that are on tripod, like you see with the man with the megaphone, that kind of a camera. And he's got to film this action on this island. They're doing, exterior remote shots. So he can't move the camera. There's no dolly shots, there were no crane shots happening. He doesn't have CGI. He just has this one camera, and the scene is when they run, when they see the head of Godzilla come up, and the islanders just pell mell just booking it. He just points the camera to them and says action, and they just run in front of that camera. They're just all running. So all you see is this line of people running up the hill. Miko goes down, Agata picks her up. More people are running and running and running. And then he cuts it all together with all these other still shots to make it look like he has just panned all over this island and you see all of this action. And he does it with a freaking stationary camera.
Yeah. Yeah.
The
And
man is
the funny
genius.
part too is that the people who were running had no idea in real life, the actors had no idea what they were running from. Right, there's nothing actually there. He was just like, "All right, just run."
Run.
You see all these people just running, and they have no clue what it is that they're running from.
They said they had to do it a few times because they didn't know where to look because there was
Right.
no green screen. There wasn't anything. They were looking up at clouds. They were looking over here. And, he's like, cut, run again. I want you to look at this particular spot because that's where Godzilla's going to be. It must have been just, I mean, I don't know how they got this done, but this man
No.
did some serious, serious, serious shooting. The other thing I wanted to talk about in the constraints is that the man in the suit, and his name is Haro Nagajima, the man in the suit, Nagajima. Please remember that name. There were two men that were in the suits, but the first gentleman, should we just say he tripped and fell and kind of decimated the set,
I
and
think we gotta tell the truth. Yeah, he fell on the set.
he fell on the set. So now Now you have made you've welded things and you put things together, and so this costume that Nagajima is in, again, more constraints. They don't have rubber. They don't have a lot of the modern things at that time because they were just short supply after the war. So this suit is made from, I believe, bamboo, cement, like I don't know, some other thing to put it together. And it took two men to put Nagajima into the suit
Yep.
and then seal him into it, and then the spikes in the back covered up the separation part, right? So then how he is sealed into this 200-pound suit. It's 200 freaking pounds, and
Well,
he is
I think
inside of it.
I read that in between takes, they would pour the sweat out of the suit because there was just nothing in there to cool him down.
Nothing,
Oh.
nothing. And he's on a remote island shooting this.
Yeah.
He's had to shoot some scenes where they said he passed out a couple of times. He was so hot in that suit. So I want to give, the man has passed away, but Nagajima, he's a stunt man who got in that suit and gave us Godzilla, gave us that incredible performance. So when they come back into Toho Studios, they now have to do the destruction of Tokyo. So here is where, Ashira and the special effects team just knock it out of the park. So now you've got a small space, you're a theater designer and you're going to try to make Tokyo, you're going to have perspective. That's the only thing you can do, right? You're going to make
Yep.
a big set and then you're going to make a smaller set behind it to make it look like you've got a whole big city,
Yeah.
right?
Forced perspective. Yeah. You use it all
Oh,
the time in theater design. Yeah.
ah. So what did you think of this design when you saw this film?
I loved it. I think so. I think I mentioned too that the two versions we were watching. So one of them is unedited; it's not cleaned up in any sort of way. And
Okay.
the other version that I had, somebody had run it through kind of like an AI filter to clean it up. So I kind
Hmm.
of experienced it in two different ways. And when watching it on an HD television, you can kind of see some of the lines and the wires and stuff in
Oh.
the, original version that's not edited. The one that was run through the AI filter looked very similar, but we didn't see all of that stuff.
Ah.
So we watched that version first. So it was really great to in some ways to kind of get that experience, which was more akin to what people would have seen at the time with the quality of what they were watching everything on, where you weren't seeing the wires and different things that were going on. You could
Mhm.
kind of see the difference between, areas where people are edited in running, and that's on a different, film stock than some of the other stuff. But just in general, it's brilliantly done. Like they
Ah.
did. And there's some miniature work that's in there too, with, cars flipping over and
Ooh.
different stuff like that. It's just really, really great work. Jay and I have done a little bit of stop motion and miniature prop making when we were running science division, because we would dress the tribbles up, put
Yeah.
them in different little like stop motion videos, and that stuff is really, really hard. And we would all the time get stuff where we're like, okay, we filmed this thing and it's like only kind of okay. How do we edit it together to make it look really great? So I've been through kind of that process of doing your best and then kind of working with whatever it is
Whatever you
you
have.
got as a result, and like, how do I make this do what I need it to do? And so
Yeah.
I have such an appreciation for that art form here. And like I said, I would much rather watch a movie made this way than watch the contemporary modern, CGI stuff that we have going on now.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I mean, this is just spectacular filmmaking. This is amazing what he's done with this. So, okay, so we have this incredible scene where Godzilla is now coming on land and he is going to destroy Tokyo. And they put Nakajima in the suit, and the guy he's got more budget constraints. He's got one shot at destroying this set. This is one of the first time they built a set to destroy it.
Right.
Even when you see Gone with the Wind and the big burning of Atlanta, that set that they burned in Gone with the Wind, they were going to burn anyway. They just said, "Hey, let's just put Clark Gable and Scarlet in the thing, and let's run them in front of it while we burn the set." But this set was built just for the purpose to destroy it. So, as we said, the first stuntman got in the suit. They made him a little trough to walk down, tripped over these 200 pounds. I'm not even going to fault the guy, but he tripped, fell, busted up the set. They work overnight to fix the set and get it back together. Then they put Nakajima in the suit, and he's got the one shot. They can't do it again, and he nails it. Ah! I was like,
So
what is
good. It's so good.
it?
The only thing I have to say, because there's a couple of puppets that get used to, and the only
Yes.
thing that drives me crazy is that his eyes change.
Yeah.
Godzilla's eyes go back and forth between these like really dark, beady eyes to the kind of like googly eye
The
look that
googly
you
eyes.
see in the earlier, kind of movies. That's kind of his signature look. And so that's the only thing in that scene. I'm just like, I just wish your eyes were the same. But it's all so good. It doesn't
Oh
even
man, I
matter.
tell you. So the puppets were made. So we have Nakajima in the suit doing the big destroy, but then we have the puppets, and one of them was the one that did the atomic breath. So his mouth was motorized to open, and came out that puppet. And then the second puppet was the one that had the mechanized jaw. So he was the one that bit the antenna. So that was the
Right.
biting. So I mean,
So
and I
good.
just want to do a shout out to the reporters who were covering the story. Like my ex-husband was a reporter, and right, and so they are covering this story until the bitter end. They don't leave their post. They are like, "This might be the last report," and I'm like, "Yeah, brother, you better
Yep.
get off of this fruit. Godzilla
Eventually,
is
they're just
coming.
like, "Yeah, we're just done
We're
for this.
toast."
Yep, this is it. Bye, everybody."
Antenna goes down, the building goes down, everybody's screaming. Oh my god, it was amazing. It was amazing.
It is really fun just watching, Godzilla just walk up and bite the tower, because like
Bite.
earlier in the movie, he has a train in his mouth all of a sudden,
My
and
favorite
we're
scene.
watching it, and I'm just like, I really need to see how that train got in his mouth, because later Godzillas have these big arms that are almost kind of like human size arms, but it didn't have
Mhm.
that same feel in this suit. The way that he moved and his movement was limited.
Yeah.
I really need to know how that train got in his mouth.
Dude, like you don't see him. Nakajima can't bend over. If he
No.
bent over, he would have fallen with the 200 pounds. So how he got that up and crunched
Yep.
it with people still in it. Oh my God. It was just that is like I remember this used to come on when I was little. We had a thing called Creature Feature, and it was Saturday morning, Creature Feature. And we had all the kids come to my apartment because my mother let us all come to our apartment. And we had a console TV. We had a big screen console TV. But the big kids, like my brother was 7 years older, they were there. The little kids like us, we were sitting cross-legged on the rug, and here comes Godzilla, and he's biting the train, and everything's going on. I mean, if there was one time I jumped up from the floor and ran to my big brother and jumped in his lap, this would be the movie. Because I mean, even watching it now, even though
Yeah.
you know all of this stuff behind the scene, it's still it's still scary when he comes out and starts just growling. It's like, get to the hills, he's coming.
The
What?
sound that he makes is just so brilliant that it just he could have been almost anything and it would have been terrifying because
Mhm.
for you hear this sound before you even see him and you know he's scary by the sound.
Oh my God. And the sound is it's funny because it wasn't done by the special effects people. It was done
Right.
by the composer. So, and if you I don't know about you, but this score is about as famous for me as Jaws. I mean, when they start the Godzilla music, dun, 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 and then the banging and the banging, the banging the pipes like the city's coming down, and then even
Yeah.
in the theme music, you hear the roars in the theme music. You're like, holy Hannah, what is gonna happen? Before the movie even starts, I'm like terrified. It's like you see all the and these credits coming up, and then this music starts, and I am like, Lord Jesus, help us all. I don't know what's coming, but it's gonna be bad. And so the composer, and looking at my cards again, there's so many cards, but uh he was told too, don't make this movie. You're gonna
Hmm.
ruin your career if you make a monster movie. And then he finds out when he gets there that he doesn't even have enough money to get a full orchestra. He's got a skeleton orchestra, but he continues because he is one of the people who had been exposed to radiation. So he was one of the Haibikusha.
Right.
And so the composer of this theme wanted to do this movie with all his heart. He was like, "Yeah, you're gonna talk about nuclear power, nuclear destruction, and all this. I've been exposed. I am one of those people." So he wrote this composition with like everything he had, and he was so proud of it when it came out. And he created the signature roar. So I guess they says like a pine tar glove, and he rubbed it across a double bass, and then he
Right.
played it backwards, and all kinds of like shades of the Beatles playing "Paul is Dead" backwards. If you
And
remember
it
that.
is a brilliant it's a brilliant sound. As you watch all of the different versions of Godzilla, all the monsters all have a very unique sound, right? And none of them comes close to the sound that was created for Godzilla's roar, and it's always the same roar.
Yeah,
I know they redid it, I think, for -1. I think there's a new they were trying to kind of replicate it a little bit because I watched a
yeah,
video where they were talking about
the roar.
recreating Godzilla's roar, but as we're watching all of the ones that were made in the 50s and the 60s and all that stuff, like, the sound of Godzilla does not change. That is Godzilla's sound.
Forever. And when
Mhm.
you hear it, there's no other monster that you
Right.
can think of that got that roar. And the atomic breath. I mean, he was melting cars. This was just unbelievable. My favorite scene is then when he comes back, they're gonna try to capture him in the net and direct him to the electric wires, the electric fencing.
Mhm.
Almost like a very Jurassic Park kind of moment that we saw with the electric fence. And here he comes to the electric fence. And he just tears through this like it's so much.
Yeah, doesn't care.
Doesn't care.
But I
Oh
have to give
man.
Japan props for how quickly they mobilized. They're like, "Okay, we have this," in the context of the movie, they're like, "We have this threat. All right, we're gonna build this defense barrier. We're gonna evacuate people, all
Yeah.
along the bay, and anyone within 1,600 feet of it, they have to move." And it's like you see a build montage, and the thing is ready to go.
Yep.
You're
Here
like,
we go. And
they're quick.
that scene is the second scene that I wanted to point out to people. Thank you, Kayleigha. That scene of the evacuation of Tokyo. Um, again, you got to remember, he's got a tripod camera. And now he's going to make the scene of the evacuation. And if you watch it, it's in two, like almost like two layers.
Mhm.
The people closest to the camera are in shadow, as if they are under a train trestle, and they are fleeing for their lives. They're going this way. And you're seeing people with, bundles and kids and wagons and animals, and they're all just getting the heck out of Tokyo. They are out of here.
Yeah.
And then behind them in the light, you see an orderly race progression to the danger of the soldiers, the ambulances, the nurses. They're all fleeing to danger. And every time I see that scene, I think of, the people that ran into the buildings at 9/11. I just,
Yeah.
for a second when I saw it, I was like, no, they were racing, I know this is a movie and I don't mean to bring it up, but it just gave me that same kind of chill that they were racing for it. They were, like you said, they mobilized immediately. And this was the kind of thing that they wanted to show the world, that Japan was going to be able to survive these nuclear blasts. They had survived Hiroshima, they had survived Nagasaki, they had survived Castle Bravo. They were going to survive, and they were running to the danger to defend the island. It was just like a crazy scene. And again, caught with the stationary camera, light and dark,
Yep.
action going either way. I mean, I just, every time I see that scene, I'm just like, this man is brilliant. I love it.
Well, and the music is in complete support of that too. You see the ships going out to do the depth charges at the beginning of the movie. You see the ambulances and the fire trucks and the tanks and everything going towards Godzilla. And every time you see that, it is this really kind of optimistic,
Hmm.
sort of patriotic sounding music. This like, we are coming together.
Right.
We are gonna get this done. That's what you're seeing. You're not hearing music of doom and gloom in those moments. This is a Japan that is uniting to take care of this problem for Japan. And
Right.
earlier in the movie, I still think one of the heroes of the movie is the woman in the committee meeting who's just like, "You've
Yes.
gotta tell," I mean, she's my hero. She's because they're talking about, okay, we've discovered this creature. We know he's a product of, H-bomb testing because the H-bomb testing destroyed his habitat and now he's woken up and it's turned him into this kind of super monster. And this woman is like, we need to tell everyone about this danger. And you have all of these men on the committee who are like, no, 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 we can't do that because, we have political tensions. We don't want to upset anybody. And she has this line and she's just like, the truth is the truth.
Right.
And we just have to deal with it.
And she said, this is what Japan always does.
Yeah.
Ooh, I was like, uh-oh, uh-oh. Yes, the women are the ones in this movie that are like sounding the alarm. They are like, we have got to get this together. You've got to tell everybody. That's a crazy scene. And then there's
Yeah.
another line in that same scene where you have that political group that's saying like, oh, let's keep this under wraps, and we're not telling anybody that we're having all these problems. And the paleontologist, the Humani, he stands up and he says, look, we've got to somehow study this creature. And the line is slipped in there and then you don't hear it again. He said, because we've got to figure out a way why he is resistant to radiation
Hmm.
for ourselves. Because they're like, look, the Americans or whoever are going to do this to us again. And we need to figure out how this monster is not dying from this atomic radiation. That's what we need to figure out. And that one line went by and I just went, woo.
The script in this is there are not actually a lot of words.
No.
There's a lot of kind of beautiful visual stuff that's going on, a lot of visual storytelling. But the little bit of dialogue that you do get, all of it is providing context. That is what makes this movie a metaphor as opposed to a cheesy monster flick. You
Right.
get a line here and you're like, that is so potent. And the stuff when you have, Sarazawa and he's talking about how he can't use the oxygen destroyer
Oh,
and he's like, humanity is weak. Even if I have it in my head, I can't promise that I won't be forced, to share this with. And he specifically says, if the political leaders find out that this exists, there's no way they don't force me to use it. And this is a scientist who has made a major discovery that can be used as a weapon, who's saying, I understand the responsibility of what I know, and I'm not handing it over to the government.
heavy duty. Heavy duty. I mean, you get it. You're like, yeah, dude, don't give it to them because you know what they're gonna do. And so I
Yeah.
want to talk about, because that's my third scene. Kayleigha, we are just so simpatico with this movie. So my third favorite scene in the film. So we talked about filming the action on Odo Island, and then we talked about filming the action of the evacuation of Tokyo. And now here is Honda filming a much quieter scene. So to give you the context of this whole scene, girlfriend now she's with Ogata, and they keep trying to tell her father and the boyfriend, the fiance, that
Yep.
they want to be a couple, but they keep getting interrupted by Godzilla.
Godzilla, yeah.
Here he comes again. He's going through the fence. Okay, let's hold on, hold that thought. Put a pin in that, honey. So Emiko goes to her fiance's house where he's been doing all these experiments with a reporter. The reporter says,
Mhm.
"Hey, can you get me into his house?" And she's like, "All right, I can get you in, but I don't know if he's going to tell you anything because he's been in his basement. He's not even telling me what's in the basement. I don't know." So they go to the house, doesn't tell the reporter anything, but Emiko stays and he takes her down into the basement to show her what he's been working on. And this is when she finds out this incredible weapon of mass destruction that he has made. And
Accidentally.
ah,
Right.
accidentally.
He
He
was
wasn't
never
intending, right?
intending. He
No.
was studying oxygen and all of its properties, and he accidentally discovers how to remove all of the oxygen from the water.
Yo, yo, I'm like, what? So he demonstrates it to her, and I love the fact that Honda doesn't show you what the thing does in the fish tank. He just focuses on Emiko's face, and she is horrified. I mean, that was her best acting scene when she just lost her mind. When that was
Yeah.
the one time she lost it, when he showed her what that thing could do, and she's like, "Oh my god!" And then he swears her to secrecy,
Right.
and she says, "Okay." She says, "Okay." Now here's Miko again, sticking with the fiance. Baby said, "Don't tell anybody." I'm not telling. She doesn't tell her father. She doesn't tell Ogata. She doesn't tell anybody that he's got this thing in the basement. So until Godzilla makes it through the wire fence, the electric fence, he has destroyed the 49th Armored Division. He is on him. He's gone through everything that they could throw at him. And my favorite scene, because in King Kong, once King Kong got up on top of that building and the planes came for him and they started shooting, that took him down, right?
Yep.
Not Godzilla. They sent the fighter jets off. They were firing at Godzilla. Godzilla is just brushing off these rockets like whatever, whatever.
They do kind of shoot like stormtroopers because you see these big glittery rockets and they're all missing.
All
And
missing
I assume
the
it's because they
slow
didn't want to
moving.
deal with it hitting the suit and the damage.
Right, don't hit the suit.
Right, they basically just annoy him into leaving.
And he's like,
He's
Godzilla's like this.
batting them away.
And he doesn't turn around because he can't turn around, but he doesn't turn around. Just walks into the water. And that's when I said, King of the freaking monsters, because they unloaded the rockets and Godzilla was like, please. Dives in. I just love that scene. Love it, love it, love it. So back to Emiko and the boyfriend, the fiance. So she comes there. After that, she tells Ogata, she tells the boyfriend, "Oh, my fiance has this freaking secret weapon in the basement, and I think we can use it against Godzilla." I'm like, girl, you just not only does she give away the secret, she gives away the secret to the boyfriend. So they both go over to the house. And here is the scene that I love. Emiko comes in, and Honda, the director, he has Serizawa come up out of the basement. Now, Emiko is looking
Mm.
at him down a hallway. So she's in the light. She looks down the hallway, which is dark. The boyfriend comes up out of the basement. The camera now pivots and turns. It's another cut. And we're looking at Emiko, who is standing in the light. And he, for a second, is so happy. He goes, "Emiko, you've come." He comes down the hallway and the scene widens. And then you see the boyfriend. And I was like, dun, 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 dun.
Ogata just steps out of the shadows and is like,
Wow,
I'm
yeah.
here
It's
too.
like, wait, oh,
And
what
you
is
could
gonna
just see it on Serizawa's face. He's like, what are you doing here?
what are you doing? I know it was just like, oh my God. No
Yeah.
dialogue, no dialogue, just the
Nope.
scene unfolds, and you're like, oh, this is trouble.
And he
And
just gets immediately cold. It's like he knows he's been betrayed
betrayed.
before they even tell him he has
Does,
been betrayed.
doesn't have to say a word. Girlfriend gave the whole thing up. It was a beautiful scene. It was a beautiful scene. And your heart felt for the fiance because he was like, how could you do this to me? So then we go down in the basement. Everybody goes down in the basement. And I love this scene because, hey, hands are going to be thrown. I'm like, what is going to happen? The guys get into it. The fiance, who's got a patch over his eye, he's been in this basement for God knows how long, making this, oxygen destroyer. So you kind of think he knows that she's kind of drifting away from him, but he hasn't done anything yet. And who did you think was going to win that fight? Because we don't see the fight, we hear the fight, and we see Emiko reacting to the fight of the two men in the basement. And who did you think was going to win the fight?
You know what? I don't even know that I was thinking about. I was just watching these two guys like sort of wrestle, going, "This is so sad," and so much like guys. So they're like half-heartedly kind of pummeling each other.
But Saragawa took him down. I was like,
Yeah.
oh no, he
It
beat the
doesn't
sea
feel like the
captain.
scientists would
The
win.
scientists won that
Yeah.
round.
Yeah. It's still just it's the equivalent of like at each other.
But the thing was, he got that eye patch because he had served in the war. So
Mhm.
this was a veteran. He was no pushover. So, when they get to tussling, I was like, uh-oh, boy, the fiance is on him for a second. And it was boom. He drew blood and Ogata is on the ground. And Emiko immediately goes to Ogata on the ground to help him up and wipe the blood away. And that's when the fiance knows game over. And the look on his face is just heartbreaking. He knows that she's no longer his. It's
Yeah.
gone.
They never actually have that conversation
No,
at all. The
never
closest
say it.
you know that he knew at the very end, the last thing he tells them
Yeah,
before he kills himself is that he wants the two of them to be happy. So
right.
there's an acceptance and essentially a blessing,
Oh,
but that's all you get. It's again one of the it's one beautiful, very succinct line
line.
that is telling this heartbreaking story.
Yeah, yeah. And he's gonna
Mm.
go. And the thing that also broke my heart was when he burned his papers. He says what you were saying earlier. He's not gonna let the politicians get this. If he's got to use it to kill Godzilla, it's going to be used this one time. So he burns it, and the look on his face when he's burning all the formulas and everything, and he's burning it, and Miko collapses. She absolutely, like, this is the thing that she knows he's been working on all of his life. That's the man that she was going to marry, and she breaks. That's the time she breaks when he burns the formula. And I mean, really. And the thing that got me was that they all apologized to each other, but Miko apologized for giving away the secret.
Mhm.
The sea captain apologized for taking the destroyer, and the scientists apologized for not giving it to them. So they never apologized for. He didn't apologize for beating him up. Didn't apologize for taking the girl. It was none of that personal stuff. They apologized for the bigger picture. It was everything about what was happening with Godzilla. That was what they were sorry about. Not like my little petty. She's my girl. She's your girl. They never got into that. It was all about how are we going to survive? We've got to get this thing.
Right.
Got to give this up. You got to give it up. It
Well,
was
and
just amazing.
the other thing that's happening when Sarazawa is burning these notes is that he still believed that this discovery he had potentially had positive use for
Mm,
humanity. He hadn't told anybody he had found it because he was going to figure out how it could be used for good.
right.
And now with Godzilla showing up, he has to give up on that hope so he can
Yeah.
use it for not even necessarily good. He's gonna save everyone from Godzilla, but he's also killing Godzilla
Yeah.
and leaving them with they haven't found a way if another one emerges because they talk about how there could be more like him. So
Yes.
it's not even he doesn't even get the satisfaction of seeing how this life work could have been used for the greater good that he imagined it would be used for.
Right. Right. And he says the only other place this is in my head. And that was the total foreshadowing. You know that, when he goes down with Ogata to launch the destroyer, he's not coming back up.
Not coming back.
He's not coming back up. And he actually
Mm.
kills himself. He doesn't, he just takes the knife and he cuts the hose. and poor Amiko is just pulling the hose up, and it's like I just went, "Oh my god."
Yeah. Well, and it's also interesting when the reporter is there earlier in the movie, when Amiko brings the reporter along,
Yes.
he says there was a German scientist who said that you had been working on something that was gonna maybe it could be maybe useful for Godzilla, defense against Godzilla. And I don't know for sure if this is what was going on or not, but it really feels like this scientist, Serizawa, is kind of a foil for those who were brought in to work on the Manhattan Project.
Mhm.
And Einstein is a German scientist who was
Right.
working on that.
Right.
And it's a little bit different situation because it's not like Einstein found something and then handed over to the government and was like, this would make a great weapon, but he did speak about his regret in having worked on that project.
Absolutely.
And so
Absolutely.
that line linking it to a German scientist kind of feels like that
It's
is
a deep
intentional.
it's a deep move. Oh, because what did you just say? There's not a lot of dialogue, but
Right.
the lines that are there.
Right. And that was something I noticed on the third watch through. It was like, "Oh, that German scientist," I bet that is exactly that kind of
Who they're
allusion,
referring to,
yeah.
yeah, who they're referring to. So, I mean, okay, so I you gotta watch this film and watch it, like you said, third watch, second watch, third watch, because I get something every time I see it. It's a spectacular piece of filmmaking, direction, everything, the sets, the lighting, the men in the suit. There's a reason why this spawned the the franchise that is the longest running in the world. But you mentioned earlier the Raymond Burr version, and so I want to talk about that one for just a little bit because that's very interesting too. And we're gonna Raymond Burr. So the Americans loved this film, but they wanted to bring it over, but they knew that the Americans in 1954 were not going to sit there, number one, and watch a complete Japanese movie. I mean, we had just fought these people in a war, so there was still a lot of prejudice going on against the Japanese here in the United States. That wasn't going to fly, and it would have to be fully, it had subtitles, so that was not going to fly. So they decided to get the rights to this. They paid Toho Studios $25,000 for the rights to the film. And then they go and film Raymond Burr and Japanese American actors scenes that they could slip into the real film, completely dub it in English, and make it like white man is in Tokyo. He's large and in charge. And I was like, what is happening? What
It's
is this
horrifying.
movie?
He shows up,
It's
he's a reporter, he gets off the plane, and he immediately has access to everything in Japan. He's in every committee meeting, he's there with all of the military officials. They're just like, "Welcome, and please have access to our whole
yeah.
country."
Right, right. And they changed some of the lines because in the original movie, they were saying, we're all alone, no one is coming to help us. They don't want to, and I think in the newer movie, they say they don't want to anger the Americans. There was something about, they didn't want to tell the Americans. But in this movie, here comes the American, and like they just open arms. And I just cannot even deal with that movie. But
Well, and they don't dub over any of the Japanese. They just
no,
show the Japanese characters speaking, and then this American translates it for you or has a Japanese character tell him what
what
they're
they said.
saying. And we were talking about how important the small amount of dialogue is, and they just devastate it in
no,
this version.
no shame.
Yeah, they just
I love the line where
it's
Raymond Burr stands there and goes, "Well, my Japanese is a little rusty." Like you have no Japanese.
you don't speak Japanese. It's so it's really voyeuristic too, right? You take this story that in the original Japanese version is very personal. It is a
Mm,
personal story to everyone who's watching it, who has just survived all of these events.
right,
Everyone watching it in Japan knows exactly what this is about. And
right.
instead, you have this white American whose name is, I think, Steve.
Steve.
Yeah, yeah. So Steve is telling you what it is that's going on, and Steve has no context, and Steve has no concern for
Oh,
culture or any of that, and it's just so
it's it
uncomfortable
really is. It's
to
really
watch
hard to
it.
watch.
They don't explain why Serizawa has an eye patch. You just see this scary Japanese scientist with an eye patch. There's no reference to it being a wound
A wound
that
from the
was
war.
inflicted upon him, probably by an American,
Mhm.
right?
Yep.
They sort of touch on the H bomb, but they get rid of
They
all
got
of
rid
the
of all of that.
all of the science, all of the here's why Godzilla came out of there. Just like we think he's a result of H bomb testing, and that's all you get,
Yeah.
as opposed to this whole committee meeting talking about how this could be possible and how it is, that the H bomb destroyed this creature's habitat.
Right.
So they're also dehumanizing Godzilla. They're taking away that sense that he has a reason to be
He
upset,
right,
that
right.
you
He's a
get
victim too.
he's a
He
victim. Right. He was just asleep. He wasn't asking for any of
wasn't
this.
doing
They
anything, and
destroy
all of a
his
sudden,
habitat. He shows up and we're like, why are you destroying our stuff?
yeah,
Right.
he's like, "What the heck did you just do up here?"
Right. Well, there's this kind of like environmental messages in there too. And I also think it's interesting in all the Godzilla movies, before the big monster shows up, there's this massive storm. Right.
Yes.
So there's an impact on the environment created by the monsters that have been created by our atomic testing.
Right, right, and even the dead fish come up, which is
Right.
also another, that was something that also happened with that Bikini Atoll. It ruined the fish supply, and I love that they put that in there, that every time Godzilla comes up, the dead fish are the first sign that he's coming, and I said, "Oh my god, they are just doing this for all the Japanese people, giving them this is what we went through, this is how it happened, this is the invisible fear," and I
Right.
mean,
Well,
it's such a movie. Oof.
between the fish being dead, like you see the villagers aren't able to fish anymore. They can't catch anything
No.
with those fish being dead. And then you have the boats that can't go out. And, in the Japanese version, you're hearing all of these people are in these hallways trying to be heard, trying to say who's going to make up for our economic losses because we
Mhm.
can't go out and fish. And it goes back to, as when you were talking about the economic devastation that the atomic testing cause for Japan, when all of their fish markets had to be shut down because they didn't know what fish was
Right,
contaminated and which
what
fish
was not.
was right.
They
And
had to
then you see that like
destroy all that food.
Godzilla creates that same kind of economic chaos for them because they can't even go out and try to fish anymore.
No, it's over.
Yeah,
It's over.
but you miss so much of that when Raymond Burr shows
It's
up.
wiped out in the Raymond Burr,
Yeah,
edition, so, I mean, if
yeah.
you must see it, go ahead, just for, just to check that box that you
If
saw that one
you
too.
need to have Godzilla mansplained to you, watch the Raymond Burr version because he gets it wrong, but he's very confident.
If you need to have it mansplained, that's
I think it's also they reorder. It's not just that they replaced 40 minutes of footage with
mm,
new crap that they shot.
right.
It's that they re-edited the scene. So the original movie starts with the destruction of this boat and this sort of what is this? We don't know what's going on, which is exactly what was happening with, the fishing boats and all of that were getting rained on with this powder,
Right.
essentially. And then at the scene that we haven't brushed on yet that I think we need to is the aftermath of the attack in Tokyo, where you
Oh,
see people being carried in stretchers by women in nursing uniforms that read very much like military, field nurses,
mhm,
and Godzilla taking out Tokyo with his fire. I mean, Tokyo was destroyed by firebombing,
bio bombs,
essentially.
mhm.
Right. So Godzilla shows up and he causes that same destruction. And you see children, I think you mentioned it earlier, being wanded for radiation. A little girl is just screaming because her mother has
Mother is,
died.
yeah, I
They're
know.
pulling her off, telling her, oh, don't worry, she'll be back soon. And she's not coming back. And you're watching that, and this is where the music is somber. This is where
Yes.
the real devastation is. It's not when Godzilla is attacking, it's this scene. And in context, you're not watching the aftermath of Godzilla's attack. You're watching the aftermath of what Japan has been going through
Mhm.
in real life, right?
Right, right.
The Raymond Burr version starts in the hospital. He's there as a victim, like, "Hey, this thing attacked us. I'm gonna tell you the story of how it all happened."
Yeah, let me tell you what had happened
Right,
was
and there is no I mean, that original scene brought me to tears watching that
yes.
happen, because
Yes.
you feel it, and the other moment that you feel is the actual passing of Godzilla.
Mhm.
It's drawn out and you see agony that, he knows he's being destroyed. And then he just to see it's a skeleton and
Yeah,
then it's
I remember.
gone. And they've talked about how, just this little bit of the oxygen destroyer would turn Tokyo Bay into a graveyard, and they have done just that. That in
Mhm.
order to defeat this monster who is born of atomic testing, which is an environmental disaster, they have to decimate anything that is alive in
And that it
Tokyo Bay.
yeah, they just had to take it out.
And you
Oh,
feel that. They're not telling you that. They are showing you that in a way where you are a participant and you are part of that.
yeah, and then it
Having
come
Raymond Burr tell you, like, "This stuff just kinda happened, don't worry about it too much." It's gone.
all it's just glossed over. And then the scene that you're talking about after Godzilla is gone, and you just see nothing, and the water
Mhm.
is just nothing in the water.
Nothing.
They come up, and you see everyone standing on the ship, and they give a moment of silence to this man that just gave his life, and even to the creature. And if you watch the film again, everyone is looking down at where, Serizawa has just killed himself and saved them all from the monster, but the professor has turned away. He can't even watch. This is the man that was his research partner. It was like a son to him. He was giving his daughter to this man, and he just killed himself with this, and all his work is gone. He can't even look. He is completely turned away. And that whole scene is just no dialogue.
When he's mourning Godzilla too, because
Yes.
he is the one, and
He
it's
kept
really interesting when they start taking the depth charges out, the
mm,
first time they're gonna go and they're gonna kill Godzilla, he is so upset that they're gonna go out and they're like, "We have found this thing, we're not gonna try to study it, we're not gonna try to talk to it," which is, I think, the one thing that never comes up in this movie. Nobody ever tries to figure out, maybe we could communicate with it, and it's like, if this
no.
was Star Trek, they'd be talking to him, but, it's not Star Trek, so, this is
No
a horror
talking.
movie, they're different. Uh, but, he's like, "We should be trying to study this creature." And he goes into his room and he's sitting in there in the dark. And Emiko comes in to see if he's okay. And she turns the light on. Right. And he's got this big, dinosaur sculpture or skeleton. It's too
Yes.
small to be a real one, but like you can see that he loves the
These
animals that
these
he's
animals, these
studying.
right,
And he's
yes.
kind of the voice for them. And he's this very, Spock and Devil in the Dark, stop trying to kill the Horda. Why don't we try to, figure out what's going on with it? Right? And
Yes.
he's that character, and that's also why I love him, because that would be
Yes.
me too. But he asks her when she leaves to turn the lights off,
Yeah.
and it makes him sympathetic to. It's interesting, and I don't know if it was intentional or not, but they talk about how Godzilla doesn't like the lights,
Light.
and he's sympathetic to Godzilla sitting in the dark, saying, "Can you just turn the light off so I can mourn for this creature
This
that we're
creature,
trying to kill?"
right?
Yeah,
Right.
and
That
it's
I've spent my
also.
life studying these kinds of creatures, and now here one comes to life, like a Jurassic Park moment, and we've got to kill it.
Yeah, nobody tries to figure out if there's a way to, relocate him, calm him down. And in the next
Mm.
movie, Godzilla Raids Again, which is not as it's nowhere near as good. But he throws out there, he's in that movie too, and he goes, "Well, we know he doesn't like light." And they're actually trying to use light bombs to lure Godzilla away.
Right.
And it's
Right.
working. Until somebody, sets up a big fire, there's this whole weird subplot that leads to a big explosion of a gas tank, and then Godzilla's angry again. But it's like you see for a moment there actually was a possibility to just like figure out how to live with each other, but that's
Yeah.
not the road we're going down.
That's not where we're going. We're not doing this. No. 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 No.
Yeah.
So anyway, we've come to the end of this conversation where we have killed a monster, and all oxygen around him, and his bones are crystallized and gone, and it's a sad moment. It's a really sad moment. But any takeaways from this film that you have with your knowledge of creating these kind of worlds and people and things?
You mentioned earlier kind of my MFA project that I was working on,
Right.
and I don't want to get too much into it, but it was essentially a three-dimensional experience where you went in and you had this kind of interaction. I'm really big into. I love tigers. I'm really big into conservation. So it was essentially this. You walked in, were 360 degrees surrounded by this sort of jungly space made
Ooh.
out of reclaimed materials, pallets, and old fencing, and they would light up, and there was a 360-degree projected hand animated tiger that showed up.
Hmm.
So at first you kind of heard it stalking you and it was growling and angry, and then you heard it came into the space and it would do all these kind of fun things, swimming and playing with you, and then at the end there were these sounds of humanity that came in, and the bright lights from humanity and all of the sounds essentially got so bright that the tiger disappeared and then it was gone. And the concept that I was exploring, and this will get back to the question you asked, I promise, but the concept that I was exploring was, how do you take a story that's really complicated in terms of all of the ways that we are impacting the environments that tigers live in and all of that kind of stuff, and make it really, really simple so
Mhm.
it's easy to understand and it's something that you feel instead of something that you're told. And so the premise, I kind of broke it down into, there were three main moments, and it was experience your and live in your apprehension and your lack of understanding for this creature when you're just hearing something stalking you.
Right.
Experience joy when it comes into the space and it's playing with you. It's rolling around in the grass like a puppy, it's swimming, it's doing all these things. So you actually get to know this creature and you befriend it. And then experience a sense of loss when it disappears. And I think
Mm.
Honda and the team that were making Godzilla, you talked about the limitations that they were facing. But one of the things that we do, in theaters is saying, okay, what are the tools we have to work with and how do we use those to our advantage? And this was a masterwork in what is the simplest, most visceral version of the story I can tell, where without having to explain it to people, unless you're watching the Raymond Burr version, they will just inherently feel and know what this is about.
Man.
And it's this beautiful use of metaphor and allegory and all of those things so that you felt the story that they were telling instead of
Absolutely.
being told what the story was.
Yes, exactly. Every time I see the end of this movie, you have to sit there for a minute, and there were definite scenes where, one scene I'm just gonna keep going for a second, when the Toho high school girls were singing the hymn of peace. That was a real high school choral group that was singing, and that was the scene that flipped our scientist to give
Mhm.
them the weapon. They were watching television, how the TV going on, I don't know, but these girls are singing for peace, and it is just so beautiful and so moving. And another reason why this is not a cheesy monster movie at all. It is Godzilla, King of the Monsters, one of the most iconic and most spectacular movies I have seen with a monster in it, or even with not a monster in it. Just an amazing film. It's a piece of filmmaking that is going to be preserved forever. I mean, they have put this in, like, it's a a treasure. It spawned this whole franchise because it was so incredible. I know that the later ones, they get into like the aliens and it's creature against creature and they kind of lose the story. But if you watch Godzilla minus one, they go back to this original story. And even though the players are different, there's no love triangle in this one, there is still a very, very emotional love story that goes on in this one too. And so they are taking their hats off to this original film, and they did it. And in 70 years, that is the first film to win an Academy Award, Godzilla minus one. So check it out. Special effects, Oscar. That's my that was like the pièce de resistance. I was like, yes, finally, 70 years they get an Oscar for
When
Godzilla.
that Godzilla, he's terrifying. When he goes to light, breath you, his
Man.
flames, like his fins pop up and it says, do,
Oh,
do,
oh,
do,
oh, oh, that
do.
was like, oh
I'm
shoot.
just like, jeez.
Jeez Louise, we are really in trouble. You better get a bigger boat. And they even have everybody I mean, take a look at that movie. That is really fantastic. So that is our show for Godzilla. I mean, I think we've told just about everything we could.
I could do this for hours.
I
You got me
know, I know.
started.
It's gonna be hours if we don't stop talking. If that's gonna be like, wrap it up.
Sorry, Yvette.
But thank you so much for coming and talking to me about Godzilla and to talking to all of us about Godzilla. I knew you would have all this insight that only a theater designer and lighting expert would, and true Godzilla lover.
Thank you for having me. It's really, this film is just, it's an incredible it's incredible and devastating storytelling. Right?
Yeah,
It's something that lives with you once you have seen it.
Right.
And so it's just been a pleasure to have some time
Yes.
to talk about it with another
Uh,
Godzilla lover.
all right. Thank you so much. The next little segment we have is our 6 degrees to Star Trek, where I get you to Star Trek from any movie I'm talking about. I'm going to get us to Star Trek in 6 or less degrees.
I'm so excited for this.
All right, here we go. We ready?
Ready.
Degree number 1. We have the movie Godzilla, 1954, made in Toho Studios in Japan. We go from that Godzilla to the infamous Raymond Burr Godzilla, made in 1956 by the Americans, which is like mansplaining Godzilla. I love that. I'm stealing that. So we go to the next degree of separation, degree number 3. Raymond Burr has always been a bad guy in movies up until this point. When he does this version of Godzilla, it flipped the script for him, and people started to see him now. The Hollywood people started to see him now as a reputable leading man. He could actually be the hero. And him being in Godzilla had a little bit to do with why he gets the TV show he got the next year, Perry Mason.
Oh, jeez.
So now here we go. Raymond Burr, that's number 3. He's in Perry Mason. Good guy in Godzilla. And from Perry Mason, we jump to the show that he does after Perry Mason. Raymond Burr is the key here. Ironsides. Ironside stars Barbara Anderson. Barbara Anderson plays, I think it's like she's a policewoman. She's a socialite that turned into a policewoman, and she's assigned to Ironside, who had been gunned down and he's paralyzed and he's in a wheelchair. If you don't know the show, it had one of the best opening sequences ever when they shoot him and it falls down. Oh my God. So anyway, Barbara Anderson plays this policewoman in this. Barbara Anderson is like the queen of the one episode in the 60s and 70s. She is on every TV show that there ever was. And one of the TV shows that she does star in is called Star Trek. And Barbara Anderson is the woman in The Conscience of the King. She plays Lenore, what was it? Kodos's daughter. And she's the one that's trying to kill Riley and Kirk. And she's causing all kinds of trouble on the Enterprise. And that's how we get from Godzilla to Star Trek. I think I got 1 degree to spare.
That's awesome.
That's our show for tonight. And let me just tell you where you can find me. At CinneCine.com. That's CINCINE.com. On all the social media platforms, I am Subrina Wood, except for Instagram, where I am Subrina_Wood. And that is spelled with Sabrina with no bloody A at the beginning and Wood with no bloody S at the end. So, Kayleigha, can you tell everybody where they can find you?
Yeah, I'm not online quite as much as I was when I was running science division, but my artist portfolio is at KayleighAZawacki.com. So if you want to see some images from some of the work I was talking about, you can find that there. And then I'm also just Kayleigha Zawacki on the various platforms.
All right. Well, thank you for coming and joining us. I really, really enjoyed this. And that's our show for tonight. Goodbye.